You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have our guest online right now, George Landrith, who's the president of Frontiers of Freedom. It's great to have you joining us again, and I'm so glad that you're working on this particular issue, and especially the part of the issue that you're taking up right now in a couple pieces. John and I spend so much time working on national security issues. In fact, we're in D.C. several times a month and in New York City attending open and closed meetings on these issues. And so when you address a U.S. visit, that particular law and other things, you're looking at this from a security perspective, and I think you're absolutely 100% spot on. And the question I have for you, George, is why are we not following existing laws, and how are we supposed to take political or politicians serious when they're proposing new laws when they don't follow the ones that are already on the books?
Well, I can't give you a good rational answer to that question because I don't think there is a good rational answer to that question, but I can tell you what I think is going on, which is, border security is not about being anti-immigration. I mean, at least that's not how I see it. I see border security as kind of a common sense sort of approach to defending your country. We have invested billions of dollars in defending against missile defense. We have a Navy, we have an Air Force, we have satellites, we have all these assets that we've acquired, built, developed, and deployed so that we can defend ourselves from risks. And those are all pretty effective tools. I mean, they're very useful. But guess what? If you say, well, wow, if you're somebody trying to attack America, you'd say to yourself, well, let's see, can't do the missile thing because they can shoot it down. Let's see, you run through it. You go, oh, well, but wait, I can just sneak in. And and then when I get there, I can put together my bomb and do my thing, and so we need to understand that when you have a risk, it's like a ship. It's not good enough to say that most of the ship is waterproof. I mean a little bit of it leaks, but not that much. The whole thing has to be able to withstand the the leaks, so to speak. And national security risks are like those leaks, and so it's part of the attempt to defend ourselves from bad guys, the Muhammad Attas of the world, of 9/11 fame. For those that that name may not be familiar, he was one of the hijackers, and we don't want people like that to be able to sneak in. And so to me, this is a very common sense issue. I'm a father of 7 kids, and we have a house that has had lots of traffic through it. Neighborhood kids, friends of friends, parents of friends, neighbors of friends, and that's great. I have no problem with that, and so we have an open door policy. We let all kinds of people in, but guess what? I don't let drug dealers and child molesters in my house. And that's what I think this is really about. This is about the ability of saying, whoa, I want to know who you are and why you're here. And if you're here because you want to come to America and be an American and have the opportunities that America affords and the freedoms it affords, we can do this in an orderly fashion. But if you're here to do bad things, if you're here to blow up our children, if you're here to enslave them with drugs and other things, no thank you. We don't need you here. And that's what every parent would do in their home. I'm not sure why a nation should do that with its nation. And it's not anti-immigration at all, because having border security doesn't mean nobody can cross the border. It just means no bad people can cross the border. Nobody who intends to harm you and your children will cross the border. But you have to be able to shut the door, so to speak, and then open it and selectively have people come in. And I think that's the problem we have now is there's no selectivity. You live on a ranch close to the border, and you have problems sometimes. I mean, risks to your family. And what's with that? I mean, that's just, to me, an insane policy. And you made a very good point, which is how can we as Americans trust the administration when it says, oh, we want a comprehensive plan? And the question is how can we possibly trust you to do and follow the law? You look at what you look at Obamacare with all the changes and just unilaterally making everything different. I've got a pen, I've got a phone. So we could pass a law that you and I agree is perfect and does everything it should do, And then the question would be is what would the current administration do with it? And I think the answer is that is anyone's guess. And I think that is part of the reason why, as a nation built on the rule of law, people should be so offended. Whether you agree or disagree with this administration's approach, it just isn't worthwhile to run a government that way, where you can just pretend the law isn't there. And it makes it so that later, when it comes time to make real reform, you're not going to make reform because nobody trusts anybody. You've got to have a basic level of trust.
I agree with you 100% on that. George, it's interesting to me because there's, it's almost like America has forgotten 9/11, except for on 9/11 when we have these gatherings and on the anniversary. But we have recent news stories. In fact, in your what you've put out here, you're discussing the fact that we have so many people here who are on expired visas. And
right.
40% of the illegal immigrants here? And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Boston Marathon bombing, the perpetrators, that I call them terrorists, but those kids were here on, I believe, expired
right.
or valid student visas. And
yeah.
so, I'm sorry, before you comment, we haven't really done anything to deal with that yet. I just saw in a news article over these last week or so, the fellow in Las Vegas, whose property was raided by over 200 federal agents and snipers because he supposedly has cows on federal land. I mean, am I getting something mixed up here?
Yeah, no. I mean, it is an interesting dilemma. I mean, on the one hand, a ton of people who've overstayed their visas are not, like the Boston bombers.
Right.
The vast majority of them, quite frankly, overstayed their visa because they liked it here in America and thought this is a great place to live and they just want to stay here. And they probably have jobs and are doing good things. And I get that. That's not what this debate is about, though. The debate is about, are we going to? Again, I'm happy to have all kinds of guests at my house. I'm not willing to have even one drug dealer or child molester in my house. And so the way I solve that problem is I have some say as to who comes in, and so you hit the nail on the head. When we have people overstaying the visa, it's one thing to say, most of them are just good folks. That's fine. Most of them are good folks, but it doesn't take but 19 people on a day, a nice September morning that's beautiful and sunny to bring America to a new realization about what a small group of people can do to a country. We need to stop thinking in terms of it's not 40,000 troops. It doesn't. Defending the border isn't about worrying. It's not like in Ukraine where they've got 40,000 Russians on their border. It could just be a handful of people. It could be 19. It could be 3. It could be 1. And we have to do a much better job of this because whether it's drug cartels, kind of marauding gangs and so forth that run through and kill. Those are things we can't tolerate. I'm actually pro-immigration. So my view would be is I want the kind of people I invite into my home as neighbors and friends to visit, but I don't want even one Muhammad Atta, even one child molester, even one drug dealer, even one criminal to be coming in. And the one way you do that is you look at your visas. We had lots of warning signs on these Boston fellows, and we lost track of them, and we didn't care, and we didn't follow up. And I think we can do better than that. And our current system isn't designed well enough to do that. And then even worse is that to the extent we have a current system, we're not even using the one we have.
Right.
So as flawed as it is currently, we're not even doing what we can do. And I think that's it'd be like me having a broken door. At least I can there's some things I can still do to protect my kids. What I shouldn't do is just leave town with the door wide open, and then be shocked that bad things happen in my home while I'm gone.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. Now, I was just looking over the U.S. visit, which is something that's been in place for several years, and it's supposed to do two things, as you point out here. One, it's supposed to gather biometric information on every foreigner entering the country so they could, one, be tracked when they enter and when they exit the country. And to me, that's sort of a no-brainer considering the fact that, everything I do is being tracked by Apple and Google and Yahoo and, every company that I'm using their products. Every time I make a move, my cell phone's in my pocket or it's in my hand, they know exactly where I am. So why can't we know where people who could be potential threats? Or just like when we go visit someone else's nation where they stamp your visa or your passport, and they want to know when you came, where you go, and why you're there, and then when you leave, so they could track you. I don't understand this, really.
Right. I mean, it's not one of the things that I always try to make very clear, because everyone acts like everyone pretends sometimes when they don't want to listen to you that border security is a surrogate for, you just don't like foreigners, and that's not my issue. I can promise you that. I'm very pro-immigration, but the reality is border security is a national security issue in the same way that missile defense is a national security issue. If you want to have a strong military, for the same reason you want to have that, you should want to have border security. And I do not understand why there's a disconnect with some folks on this issue, because border security is not about preventing legitimate immigrants from coming to America. Border security is about preventing the bad guys from sneaking into America, and that's the real issue. And so, to me, the goal, again, I have a good lock on my door. I've got a good door. All those things. Why? Not because I'm trying to keep people out generally, but because I'm trying to keep certain people out. And that's reasonable. That doesn't make me closed-minded. It doesn't make me mean to my neighbors. It's just, in fact, it would be irresponsible of me, and maybe even criminally irresponsible of me to, just leave the door open all the time and put a sign out front that says, no matter what you want to do to my family, you're welcome to come in. That's not the right approach.
You're spot on. As the father or the man of the house, far more than just implicit, your job is the commander-in-chief of that house. You are the protector of that domain. And that's exactly what we should expect from our president and quite frankly, from our Congress. And sadly, even when the states have made the attempt to provide for border security, they've been treated like the bad guys, more so than the guys on the border. The point I want to make up, and you touched on this before, is that you mentioned the drugs, criminality, et cetera. Part of the problem here is this is such an overt vote-buying scandal that has been wrought upon the American people for false reasons. And the reality is that it is no surprise that terrorists who have funded much of their operations around the world through narcotics have teamed up with the narco, I guess after 65,000 or so people dead in a matter of a handful of years along the southern border, have teamed up with narco-terrorists. So this is actually becoming very dangerous. You have radical terrorists, and you have some of the most vicious thugs known to mankind literally slaughtering tens of thousands of their own people teaming up on our southern border. And the father of this nation's house seems to have no concern to do anything about it because it goes against, in my opinion, nothing more than what has become a vote-buying scheme. So I think it's very important, and I praise you up, down, and sideways for taking the security approach to this issue, because it is, I believe, the single most important aspect of this immigration issue.
I agree. And when you look at the risks our nation faces, I was incredibly disappointed to see the president shut down our expansion of missile defense to cover not only our allies but our eastern seaboard. It was one of his very early acts in his presidency in 2009. But this is in many respects even more dangerous because, and I'm a huge proponent of missile defense. I mean, our founder was essentially the godfather of missile defense. He introduced the subject to Ronald Reagan at Paul Laxalt's ranch in 1976 before he ran for president in 1980. And it's a big issue for us. But this is also just ask yourself if you're doing a risk assessment. And if somebody wants to do something to America, would it be easier to hit us with a nuclear weapon via a missile right now, or would it be easier just to sneak something in through one of our borders? And the answer is today it's clear it's easier to sneak something in. Because we're just basically, we're asleep at the wheel.
You're spot on, and it is absolutely asleep at the wheel. I mean, Brett and I certainly do not have access to the presidential's daily security briefings, but we are privileged enough, as he pointed out earlier, to meet with a lot of very senior, including people who used to run the CIA, on a regular basis. And it is in no way a surprise to our leadership that the enemies of this country, including people like Iran or like Hezbollah or like Hamas and others like them, overtly tell us, go ahead and mess with us. We have all kinds of sleeper cells already in your country ready to wreak havoc. If they're saying it, is it a bluff? Do you really want to find out? Post 9/11, do you really want to find out if it's a bluff? And either way, is that not a giant wake-up call that protecting our southern border is a critical to-do list?
I would agree with you on that, and that's why, to me, it's frustrating. I understand why some people have different views of how much legal immigration we should be permitting, and that's a debate we need to have as a country. I do not understand why there's any debate at all about whether or not we should secure our border, because securing your border doesn't preclude a single real immigrant from coming to the United States. Whatever number we all agree is the right number, or that border security won't preclude it. It will give us confidence that we've actually let those people in and welcome them in, and that when they get here, it'll be a safe place, because we won't have let all the narco-terrorists and other, the next Muhammad Atta or whatever in. So to me, I am perplexed as to why, if there should ever be the issue in which virtually every single human being agrees, this is it. I mean, I would expect the only people to disagree with this would be the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda. And everyone else would be like, yeah, makes perfect sense to me. But that's not how it's working out, and it perplexes me to no end.
That's a good point. George, we have about a minute left we could spend with you. I'd like to ask you this question. If members in Congress or even the administration, who is most serious about ensuring that the national security issues of immigration are being addressed?
That's an interesting question, because in a lot of what's going on in Congress right now, it's not clear that issue is being paid proper attention to. It tends to be the people who are concerned about national security in general. Tends to be, meaning that if they are champions of national security in general, they tend to grasp the importance of border security. But on a practical level, some of this debate, to me at least, it feels like this issue is being lost in the political wrangling over, does being for border security mean that somehow you don't like people from, Central America or something crazy like that, this is not that issue, but yet that seems to sometimes overrun the rest of the conversation, and it scares politicians off when, like I said, this is no different than missile defense.
That's very, very interesting comments. Well, George Landrith, once again, thank you for joining us. George is the president of Frontiers of Freedom. George, if you can, could you please provide the website of your organization so our listeners could find out more and, of course, follow you?
Absolutely. It's easy. It's just ff.org. FF like frontiersfreedom.org.
That's great. Well, that's as simple as it gets. George, it's great speaking with you, and, of course, we look forward to having you back on the program soon.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care. Have a good afternoon.